Hello. From the polymath to jack of all trades, and the poly-innovator encompasses it all, the multi-talent definitions of a person, regardless if you're someone on the beginning of the scale or someone on the further along on the scale. The idea of poly-innovator is the modern equivalent for a lot of these terms for multidisciplinary people. Now, just right off the bat, I'm not saying everyone should call themselves that, but the idea behind why I created poly-innovator as a word for myself, that is what I want people to talk about. And that idea is the meta niche. If you by following a meta niche or an umbrella topic, you have that diversity of polymathy beneath it. And so this is a lot about personal branding and being a multidisciplinary person in the modern world. This is the rise of the niched polymath. Now this might seem counterintuitive considering what niche means specialty and polymath means generalist, but I'll only get into that here in this episode. So hello and welcome to PolyInnovator. My name is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and this is the channel around self-education, polymathy, and this this series called Omni-Content, which is around us creating all these different topics into an easy-to-produce system. Now, this is the episode number 7 of the Multidisciplinary Spectrum, which is a mini-series that I created in order to explain all these different terms for being multidisciplinary. And so it's not just about the depth, it's also about the width, and true mastery isn't always about depth. And so sometimes when you want to be multidisciplinary, you may have to approach it in a way of being multidisciplinary, but the way you share it with the world, the way you market yourself is almost akin to being a specialist on paper, but in actuality you may not be. Alright, so I wanted to go into this post with this idea of the multidisciplinary spectrum. And so the idea is to talk about being someone who's a jack of all trades or multidisciplinary person, and how do you approach that as a content creator. Because this is something I talk about one of the posts linked in this blog post about building a personal brand around being a jack of all trades, but the idea of niching down is often a common occurrence when it comes to creating content. Now, to skip ahead a little bit on the post, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. It usually has to do with the SEO, or search engine optimization. If YouTube or Google can't decide what you are about, it makes it really hard for you to rank and grow. However, I've noticed with people like Tim Ferriss or even Joe Rogan and other big creators, John Lee Dumas, and all these creators that don't necessarily have a specific niche, they have been able to grow purely because they have the tenacity to keep going, and they found whatever their meta niche may be. Ali Abdaal's another good example, and his meta niche, I guess you could say, is productivity. Someone who's a productivity as a specialist, but also generalist. He's kind of in that mixed ground there where he has his specialty, him being a doctor, but he's also more of a jack of all trades too. He's T-shaped. That's why I even had him on the show, because he is someone who's multidisciplinary. So it's a great example there. So the idea of the niched polymath, and that's why I had this screen share here. When you're a niched polymath, it is someone who is able to find what that meta niche or umbrella is for your overarching topic pool. So whether you are talking about swimming, like in my case, as well as omni-content and just being omni-channel, or even just being exercise and education-centric, I have all these different topics, including gaming and also music as well. They all fall underneath the umbrella of PolyInnovator. In order to pursue genuine polymathy, someone who is like Da Vinci with 15 different deep specialties and progressed in those areas, like he helped humanity progress in those areas, even if it wasn't publicly available at first. But it was one of those things where he could be what's known as a genuine polymath because he was able to do it such deeply in so many areas. But the idea of polymathy isn't necessarily knowing everything. It's not necessarily even being someone who is doing 15 different areas. The basic sense that we talked about in the last episode is just 3 to 4 areas at a deep level. And understanding that you can't know everything, and that's okay. That's not the point of this series or being polymathic or being a polymath. You're not supposed to know everything. You're supposed to know many things deeply well. And that whole idea is what I want people to understand, because when you can understand it that way, you can realize it's a much more achievable goal. Being a genuine polymath just essentially means you just kept going. Instead, you didn't stop at 4, you just kept going past that. And the reason why I bring that up in this episode is that the niched polymath is someone who simplifies that 3 to 4 ratio with a more palatable, or opportunistic approach, where instead of being necessarily like science, art, engineering, and like coding or gardening, some kind of like other big skill that's completely different from the other ones, instead of having such disparate options, It's more along the lines of like STEM, where you have science, technology, engineering, and what's the M stand for? Medicine, I guess, or whatnot. But regardless, whenever you are pursuing those, they're all very interrelated in a way. And so when you pursue, like, let's say, computer science, IT is not that far off. Cybersecurity is not that far off. Cloud development is not super far off. And they're all part of that comp sci umbrella. And so when you split off into those different areas, honestly, you're not necessarily splitting off very far, but you are doing a new specialty as well. So your niche, if you will, is computer science. That's your umbrella. And then within there, you have all these different subtopics. And the point is, you have different areas that are normally separate, but you put it all underneath that big umbrella. So PolyInnovator is this idea of being a polymath of innovation. I want to innovate certain areas. My goal is to go into those areas with the intention of changing how we approach it. I'm not even trying to do anything necessarily in a basic sense. I'm just going straight in just to do something different. And that's probably what everybody's doing. So I'm not necessarily special in any way. But my point is, that's my intention. That is the goal I'm setting forth in each of these areas. And so the idea of having this unifying meta niche is the topic of today. So Tim Ferriss has a great video on this, like, should you specialize or be a generalist? And his idea is being an expert generalist, which is also on the spectrum as well. Maybe I should even made a video on it too. But that's kind of what the whole idea of what this is about, like being an expert in one area and then being a generalist in the rest of the areas. And so that way you're not necessarily mastering many areas, but you are going deep enough to be more than a lay person on a certain topic, but you also have your specialty. Again, a good reference is Ali Abdaal. His specialty is medicine. He went to school for it. He's a doctor. He's even like a senior doctor. He's not a junior doctor. He's a senior doctor. And yes, he put it off to the side so he can focus on content creation, but that is like his niche. That's his specialty. Beyond that, he has productivity. He has content creation. He has other topics as well. And so he's been able to generalize in that way. And so the whole idea of being an expert generalist is having that T shape, but that T at the bottom is just a little bit higher. So down here, you may be a jack of all trades with one specialty, however deep that specialty may be. An expert generalist is just someone with a slightly deeper generalized wide. And then you have a polymath with someone like way up here in multiple areas. That's the whole point behind this multidisciplinary spectrum, is to find where you are in that level. Do you have multiple towers? Do you have just one with a little bit of down here or a little bit here? It doesn't matter. But I want you to be able to find where you are on that spectrum and work on that next level. And he talks about having leverage. Tim Ferriss talks about having leverage in his video about like what is that leverageable skill that you can use to build yourself up and be able to use in other areas as well. Content creation could probably be mine in this case. And so the whole idea of being a niched polymath is just having that umbrella topic that you can use as your anchor, as your expertise, that you can then hold up the umbrella of all the other topics, if you want to use that analogy. So PolyInnovator is mine. I'm not telling you should be a PolyInnovator. In fact, I would hope someone doesn't necessarily steal my name, but the whole idea behind it was just to inspire others to be able to find their own term or find their own way of doing things. I talked to someone who didn't necessarily agree with multi-potentialite as a term. He thought octo-potentialite would be a better term. And I think that's fantastic. He changed the word to fit him. So this umbrella niche is this idea that you could have as the anchor for all the other topics you want to do. Each topic is essentially the different lines of that meta niche. Your meta niche is going to encompass your personal brand and you as a whole. Then each line or subtopic will be a different phase. And over time, you'll have different phases. And they can interlink together. It doesn't have to necessarily be one after the other. I believe they actually interleave quite a bit and they kind of mesh together. Honestly, I'm still on phase 1 when I feel like I'm actually in phase 2 right now. I still need to create the platform for modular education. I just didn't think it was going to happen yet, so I focused more on phase 2. In between those two, I had kind of a spontaneous phase that was about doing interviews. So they're not necessarily like ground in stone. Within those phases, though, you're going to have different projects. Like I was trying to build the MVP for the modular degree, so I built that in Notion. The next project is going to be creating content around using that template and using that kind of idea. And just so forth. And that's just one aspect, but same with exercise too, same with the gaming. It doesn't matter what particular sub-niche I'm talking about, they all break up into different projects. In those projects, you're going to have certain goals to accomplish. Like you want to get this out by this point. You're going to have the goal to do that many pieces of content for that topic, whatever it may be. It's phases, projects, and goals. And that same mentality is what I use in the poly-innovation operating system as well. So when you get into that, you'll have those layers of extraction for you already. So following the state of mind, it really does go into personal branding, obviously quite a bit, and I'm definitely a big advocate for that. Although that seems kind of businessy to some people, but all personal branding is your online reputation and you choosing how you want to be perceived. You can't necessarily control it per se. Like, everyone's going to have their own opinion of you no matter what. I've had some people who really like me and some people who don't really like me. I have a strong personality. It's going to be pretty extreme when most people have opinions of me, but that's just how I am. Some people are more just in the middle ground, where people are going to have some opinions that are great, some opinions that are not so much, and they might be more generalized on that. And that's a good thing. I hope they are more like that, because having a strong personality definitely sucks, because people are going to have much more negative things if they have negative, and they're going to have much more positive things too if it is positive. So that's why it's so important to have your personal brand, and so that you can curate as much as possible on your end how people can perceive you. And so at the very least, you can try to show them why you might be more towards the positive side. And I think that too, personal branding is something that everybody should do at some point in their life, like creating some sort of content, even if it's just a white paper or a book or something like that, finding some way to express yourself and contribute to humanity. That's kind of the idea there. But personal branding is going to lead into the next web, so to speak, Web 3. And I think that generalists are going to thrive in this Web 3 because of the way that just internet has changed society, and generalists are going to thrive in this new dynamic world, and so we're going to have a lot more opportunity this way. All in all, I don't necessarily need this video to be too long, because this whole idea of poly-innovator is just my particular niche polymath that I wanted to go into. And I try to take a modern approach to it, and that's kind of the same idea behind all these different terms. Taking a modern approach to each of these terms, so modern, like multi-potentialite is still a pretty new word, but it does originate in the Italian, and on top of that too, polymath is a pretty old word. But regardless of which term you identify with, taking a modern approach to that and making it your own. Please go check out the rest of the Omni content series and look forward to the next episode, which will be the finale. I'm still excited about this one because it's going to be huge. I've already seen that this mini-series has been extra long compared to other Omni contents. That's okay, but it's really going to be interesting when this all comes together. Alright, cheers, bye.